I Testify is about testifying of what Jesus Christ has done and can do in each of our lives. Through testimony of people just like you and through study of His Word, our prayer is to encourage each follower of Christ to be a light in this world. So let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Matthew 5:16. Hello and welcome to I Testify. Today we have with us our very good friends, Daryl and Bernice, and they've come all the way from Australia to visit us. And they're here to chat with us about friendship evangelism through care groups. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, actually, I'd like to start with how your entire family got converted, because you have your own experience with friendship evangelism, being on the receiving end. Please tell us about that.
Yeah, well, we grew up in Singapore, and our parents were Pentecostal Sunday Christians. And one day, my brother Daryl was quite sick, and they needed to send him to the nearest hospital being Youngberg Adventist Hospital in Singapore. And it was there at that hospital that I believe your great aunt, Kristyn, and your great uncle were missionaries there. They were running a New Start program. And your great uncle, Uncle Clarence, was my brother's pediatrician. And so they cared for him. They taught my family about hydrotherapy and diet reform. And from that sparked an interest to want to know more about what the Adventist Church could offer them. And so they welcomed my parents into their home small group, and they gave them Bible studies, and over a series of months they were baptized.
And the funny thing is that I did not know that story until only just a few days ago. So, I mean, it's a small world, and there may be connections that we have and we don't know what kind of influence our family members and even ourselves may have. So that was a wonderful story to hear.
And I don't think they even imagined what it would be like and what the ripple effect would be many years down the track, because we moved from Singapore when I was 9 years old, and so that was maybe 7 or 8 years after we became Adventists. We moved to Australia, and because of the influence of this small family on my family, my parents decided to replicate the same thing when we moved to Australia, because they had experienced firsthand what it was like to have friends who brought them into the church. And so that sparked the kind of effort and energy and the things which we are going to talk about today, all the way traced back to the start, but continued on through the rest of our lives as well.
Can you share, because last night we were talking, Daryl and I were talking, and you were telling me specifically about what it was like on the Sabbath. And I just wanted for you to share that with everyone, what it was like to have somewhere to go on the Sabbath when you were just newly converted or just new to the faith.
Yeah, we were part of a big church. And sometimes in a big church, there's not potluck every week. And so you kind of find your own little group of friends to have lunch with, or find someone who's nice enough to invite you to their house for potluck or for Sabbath afternoon lunch. But what we did find was that every Sabbath we knew that as a family we would be invited, and we would be invited along with other people, sometimes visitors, sometimes regular church members, whoever wanted to come to this particular missionary doctor and his wife, their house. And for the entire afternoon, there would be Bible study, there would be singing, there would be prayers, there would be discussion, there would be fellowship, and also outreach to others. Whoever came was welcome and learned. In fact, I was telling Kristyn, we had family members, extended family members, friends, domestic helpers, nannies. People would come, and some people would even be baptized as a result of this friendship evangelism on a Sabbath afternoon. And we would stay the whole afternoon and have dinner together. So it was like morning Sabbath school, church, and then Sabbath lunch, and then Sabbath afternoon, and then Sabbath dinner. And we would become accustomed to spending the entire Sabbath together as a family.
I think that's very important and significant, that it was really just the knowledge that the door was always open.
I had a similar experience. I mean, when I was coming into the church, I had a friend who was kind of the entering wedge into being understanding Adventism or knowing about it. And so his family, I knew him from before, but when I started studying into Adventism, they were definitely more welcoming to have me there. And when I was hanging out with him, Sabbath became a new phenomenon to me, and how to do it, and just having a place to go and almost like that second family where I felt like comfortable and welcomed, and how to embrace the Sabbath was really pivotal for me to embrace Adventism. I think it really was. It was very pivotal for that.
Yeah, but I found in our story, as we were blessed, we learned how to be a blessing to other people as well. And so I have such fond memories of that time in Singapore when I think I was only 4 or 5, but after a few months of having this love poured out to us, it just became natural that, you know, as a 4 or 5-year-old, I wanted to help cook as well, and I wanted to help prepare. And we were always the token kids that would have to sing the Bible chapter we'd memorize before we got to eat, you know, for the entertainment or for the adults. And so it just became a culture of everyone is here to give and also to receive.
And you were participating as well, even though, you know, oh, you're really young, maybe you can't do anything. No, that's not the
Right,
case.
yeah, exactly.
There's something for everyone to do at every age.
Absolutely.
And so now, actually, I mean, I don't know if you talked about this, but you're replicating what your experience was for your parents. You're actually replicating your own life because you're a physician and you're a dentist, which is exactly the same kind of medical experience that the person who introduced Adventism to your family. So you're duplicating it in your own lives to the T, almost.
Well, sort of, I guess. But, you know, healthcare is one of those industries which always has an opportunity for you to reach out and to witness and to share. And not only to your patients that you see, their families, but also to your colleagues. And it's a great avenue to be able to reach others for Christ. But I don't think it's just healthcare that offers that opportunity. I think no matter what profession you're in, no matter what job you're doing or what environment you're in, it's an excellent opportunity to share Jesus with your friends, your colleagues, your community. And that's what friendship evangelism is about. We weren't just accepted because we had status or we had a profession or we had some intelligence or some credibility or some position. We were accepted because people extended their arm of friendship according to what they believed in and the values that they espoused to anyone who was willing and open to come and participate and listen. And so that's what we try to do now in Australia. Maybe we can share a little bit about what we do.
Love to hear.
So after we moved from Singapore to Australia, we became part of a ministry and a group of young adults predominantly, along with some older ones. And my sister and I, we were the youngest of the group, but really to reach out initially to a very select and targeted group. And these are people who perhaps are in the community in many places, even here in the United States, but they don't really have a group or a family to belong in. And what we are referring to is that we were involved in friendship evangelism to international students. You see, in Australia, education is a big industry. We have 15% of the economy runs because of education, and that's a lot of students from Asia, from the Middle East, from Africa who are sent to Australia by the governments to study on scholarships or who, seeking a better educational experience, come and sacrifice a lot. They come to the country with no friends, no family, often not speaking the language, and they're thrust into this cutthroat environment of academia where they have to perform and to succeed. And so we began a ministry to start to reach out to these people. And I can just remember the very first stories coming out. You know, this is 15 years ago. And the struggles in which we had. You see, our church was out in the community, so about 45 minutes drive from the city centre where the main university in Melbourne is based. And it would be a struggle to invite your friends or your housemates to go and wake up on a Saturday morning with no car and take a train for 45 minutes to an hour one way to church to get there on time for Sabbath school at 9:30 and then sit through a church service, which you probably don't understand or appreciate, and then take another train ride 1 hour home to go back after church. And that was instead of sleeping in on a Saturday morning, as most students do. And so because of these experiences and the dedication of the young people in the church, we decided, look, let's bring an experience to them. Let's befriend them before we encourage them to come and join our church service, which they may not be comfortable with. And so there we started the concept of what we call evangelistic small group ministry. And we have an acronym, we call it CARE groups. Christ's attitude reflected in everyone, CARE. And this is exactly what we try to do, to demonstrate Christ's attitude and Christ's love through friendship before they become Adventists in the future. You see, most of the time, maybe Bernice, you can share with us a little bit about the belong, behave concept that we have. And the reason behind it is it underpins everything we do.
I think what we found is that a lot of the young people, especially in Adventism nowadays, are used to this version of the gospel that focuses on behaving and the behavior and what we should be doing as an Adventist, what that lifestyle looks like. And then we go backwards. We say, okay, well, if you behave this way, it's because you believe these things. And if you believe these things, that means that you belong to this group of people that we consider our community, our Adventist community. Whereas when we were opening up our homes to people and just, following the principles of Acts in the early church and how in Acts 2 it talks about how they opened up their homes for fellowship, eating bread, just sharing that time together. That belonging became our first priority. And so it almost became a reverse paradigm. We helped people to belong to this community first, and from there that triggered an interest to want to know what we believed in. And from there, the character change and the lifestyle change just naturally followed. I wonder if we want to turn to that verse, Acts 2, verse 46. And this is what has really underpinned our ministry and our ethos here in back in Melbourne, I should say. And Acts 2, 46 and 47 says, "So continuing daily with one accord in the temple and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved." I think Daryl talked a lot about how we targeted a specific group of people. I don't think it was necessarily that we took out a map of Melbourne and we're like, okay, I think that's where we should go. It was really just a natural extension of people wanting to reach those in their sphere of influence. And so for the people in our church, there was only a handful of 19, 20-year-old university students who were perhaps at different stages in their faith, different stages in their spiritual journey, but they recognized that in order to strengthen themselves and in order to reach those around them, they needed to do this. And so for those that are watching, your sphere of influence may not be international students. It may be your neighbors, it may be your colleagues. But the principle of Acts is very simple, it's very clear, and it's very effective. That friendship evangelism can work in any setting.
And it happens on a day-to-day basis. It's not just once a week. You go to a gathering, or you go to Sabbath school, or you see them at church and you wave goodbye, and then after 12:30 p.m. on Sabbath afternoon, you never see these people again until the next week. This is an everyday thing. The apostles were going house to house, breaking bread daily. In other words, they were having a meal together every day. They would see them at the shops. They may go to the grocery store together. And this is what has become part of how we live our lives. We started with international students, but as time has gone along, that has expanded to different groups. Let me give you one example. We have some young families with young kids in our church. And so their form of friendship evangelism is they will bring their kids to the local shopping center playground or the local park. And as the kids are playing, they meet other kids as they play together in the sandpit, on the swing, or on the monkey bars. And the parents will use that time to talk to the other parents about different things, schools, about maybe the neighborhood they live in, maybe some current issues, but then steer the conversation towards values and towards things which they want for their kids. And then use that as an opening wedge to share about their care group and invite them across to their house on a Friday night or a Wednesday night or a Saturday night or whenever their care group is running, sometimes in the morning because they have a mother's group for the kids and their mums, and then use that as an opportunity to share about Christ. And so that's friendship. It starts in the playground, it starts in the park, it starts in the shopping center, but that expands. And you know, it doesn't matter whether you're 5 years old or 55 years old or 95 years old. It's the same concept repeated day after day as part of your life.
I should go to the playground.
Don't scare the kids.
I think when I look back at the way that God has blessed over the past 15 years, it's just astounding to me the inspiration that He has given to people as to how to reach their friends when they come together and pray. So I think of our young adult group, and typically we find that the transition between university life and young professional life is quite a tumultuous one, perhaps. For people, it's very hard to get people to commit once they're in a young professional setting, because suddenly they've got their careers, they're very focused, they might live in the city as opposed to in the suburbs. You don't have such a captive audience as you do with international students. And so the young adult group was really struggling to keep people coming to their group on a regular basis. And so they got together and they prayed and they said, we still have a burden for our colleagues and our peers. And so they recognized that a lot of their members were nurses and health professionals. And so they decided that they wanted to do something in that vein. And so they scheduled a time to go to the Red Cross, which is our national blood donation center in Australia, one Sunday. And they all, they were about 12 of them, and they scattered themselves amongst the other people in the community that had come to donate blood. Now, when you're donating blood, you have to sit there for 30 minutes. Like, you have nowhere to go. And so they made intentional conversations with the people on their right and on their left. And they said, look, do you donate blood often? We're here, once a month. After this, we're going to get a bite to eat. There's a couple of us here. Do you want to come? And then people would come to their lunch or whatever, and then they'd say, we're going rock climbing next week. We like to be an active group. We like to keep healthy. And then it just flowed on from there. And so I recognize the power in having like-minded people with the same burden that God has placed on your heart, just coming together and saying, Jesus, we want to bring our friends to you. Teach us and show us how to do that.
I like how it's kind of casual. I mean, they're going from house to house, they're breaking bread. I mean, it's not nerve-wracking. Let's just eat, let's just talk, let's just do something that's not threatening. Because when you think about inviting someone to church, I have to dress up, and it's kind of nerve-wracking, I don't know anybody. But here it's more like, hey, let's just go out to eat, and let's just be friends, just be normal, let's just hang out. And slowly but surely, your light shines, and, that one thing leads to another.
And Genesis, I think you touched on a really important point, because it requires a significant paradigm shift. You see, often when we're in Adventist circles, or if we've grown up in the church, we know that there's a particular way in which we behave or carry ourselves. And some people would refer to it as cultural norms, the types of things we eat, the time you show up at church. And people who are not part of this community or who have never grown up in this community, it's all very foreign. And when you walk into a place where you're surrounded by a lot of people, imagine yourself going to a place where you don't know anyone, and they have all these different things and different ways of doing things, and all of a sudden you have to kind of conform in some ways or try and fit in. And so the paradigm shift is around making it comfortable for people who are not used to that system. People who are not used to that culture almost. People who are not used to what's going on.
But the interesting thing is that when people really feel like they belong, it's amazing how far and how quickly they will grow in their faith. I think of international students that 8 months prior had never even opened a Bible, but because they're so used to belonging to this group of friends, they spend we run our care groups on a Friday night. And the reason we do that is because we want to model to them and help them to observe the Sabbath. We want to teach them what it looks like to observe the Sabbath, because they've never seen that. And so they come with us on Saturday morning as well. We feed them lunch, and then on the Sabbath afternoon, usually we're doing some kind of outreach activity. So it might be that we go on the campus and we give out leaflets to a seminar that we're running, or we might do surveys. And they're just so used to hanging out with us that before they know it, they're doing outreach before they're even baptized. And to me, that's the biggest sermon about how to win someone over to Jesus, to just really pour your life into them and to model that lifestyle. And then it becomes, as you said, Genesis, very natural. No need to organize, okay, let's conscript people to come out on Sabbath afternoon outreach.
Something I appreciated about what you shared is that, I'll oftentimes, in this particular circumstance, you have international students and they may not know anyone, so I think it's easier to connect with a group because now they have some intimacy in their life that they were lacking. But in societies where, for example, we're in Loma Linda, you might have international students, but what if you're in a place where there aren't international students? You might have people where they already have friends. And so, but people like to expand their friendship circles, so if you can show yourself as an attractive person by character, by quality, showing you care, they're more likely to come along to the invitation, and then they meet your friends, and they develop a new friendship circle, and then you're going to have that opportunity to open up the Gospels to them because you've developed that friendship. And I thought of a verse in John 15 which reminded me of this with Jesus. John 15:15, it says, "Henceforth I call you not servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth, but I have called you friends. For all the things I've heard of my Father I have made known unto you." And the principle I take away is, you're no longer strangers to me. I don't call you strangers, I call you friends. And I think that's the kind of model that Christ was leading. He didn't just want to teach them so that way they knew the truth and that way they could be instructors themselves and get the gospel. I need to get the gospel out, so make sure you know the truth. It's, well, first I want you to know I care about you. You're my friend. And because I care, I want you to know these things that are going to be really important for your life.
I actually really like that too, because I was thinking, when they are seeing Christ in us, they already know Christ. So when God called them to join him, they already know who he is. They've seen the example through your example, which I love. When you read in Acts 2:47, it says, "Praising God and having favor with all people, and the Lord added to the church daily." The Lord was able to add to the church daily because they already knew him. That's so important.
I think it's a really good point that you brought up, Reed, to recognize that this is a model that's replicable across culture and across demographic as well.
Because it's a biblical model. It's not specifically only for international students. That's where it started for us. But it's since expanded. And, there are groups that we know of around Asia, around Australia, even in the United States, in Europe. And because it's such a simple thing, started by the New Testament apostles and New Testament church and continued throughout history.
The beauty of small groups, though, is that it fits perfectly into the workings and the mission and the vision of the Adventist Church. And sometimes when we think of small groups, they can become a little bit of a silo. They can kind of become a small clique or kind of a mini church in some ways. But God blessed us in the sense that naturally the groups that we had formed, we started with maybe 5, they became a church plant of their own. And from there, God grew it. We now have 5 church plants, and we have people that have been in Gateway go all over the world and bring the message and the principle of small groups with them. And so now there are small groups in Mauritius, there are small groups in Germany, in parts of North America, all over Asia.
Small groups here.
There's small groups here, that's right. There's small groups here as well. And I just love to see how, as people change the phase of their life as well, when they move from student to working professional, then maybe they have a young family. We even have a seniors care group. They like to call themselves Oasis. There is opportunity to reach anyone at any age, at any stage of your life, no matter where you are.
In the church, they like to. There's a problem in our church, and that's that young people are leaving. But it's not just young people. People that come into the church, they hear the message, they're convicted, they're convinced, they're baptized, they sit in the pews, and then they leave. And so there's this question about why are they not staying? And what they came up with is if you haven't established at least 7 friends that you're going to leave. And you've already, just care groups starts that from the very beginning.
Right.
They already have friends. That's why they came in. It's easier to stay right off the bat.
I'd just like to add also, I think there is a very big line, a difference between being intentional about having friends, wanting to grow your friends, and having an agenda. And I think care groups is intentional. It's not some ulterior motive, that, oh, we're going to bait and switch you and here's the gospel now. It's just all one and the same. It's very natural, like Genesis, you were saying. And that's powerful because what you're saying, and Daryl, you were saying there was a paradigm shift. It's a mindset change, that you care about their eternal soul. It's not just the end goal. And when you actually love them for their eternal soul, that's what God has done in you, then it just goes naturally from there.
And I think the two go hand in hand because it's outreach focused, because it's evangelism focused, because it's mission driven. That love of Christ has to really come across. They're eating your food, they're hanging out in your house, you spend and invest energy. There's no ulterior motive. If they walk away, you've still planted a seed in their heart. That, down the track, we've seen stories where 2 or 3 years later, people have come back after being in care group for a while and made a decision. It's not always instantaneous, it doesn't always follow a single pathway, but we know that we have the opportunity to share Christ with them.
And being involved in care group gives you such a purpose, because coming back to church and have those 7 friends that you're talking about. And so it was amazing. I think God gave me a purpose. I wasn't involved in care group yet, but having my own friends that I brought into the church, they were my friends. And so I didn't have that friendship already in church, but when you are intimately involved and caring about other people, it just gives you that sense of purpose that propels your love for God along as well.
Absolutely.
I think the intentionality is an important point, which is what we're all talking about. And a lot of times there's this idea, I'm going to plant seeds. I want my life to be a witness. But the social gospel just stays social. It's just a friendship, but there's no evangelism. And so you're very intentional and you have a plan. You're not just going to fly by the seat of your pants. It's like we're going to be very deliberate. And I think that's so important if you're actually going to try and measure your success and see, people's lives being changed.
Yeah, for sure.
Just touching on that a little bit more, we have seen over the 15 years that we've been involved in this, we can draw almost a family tree of someone who's brought a friend, who's then brought a friend, who's then brought a friend. And the chain is 10 or 12 long over this period. And we've seen how God has worked and replicated and replicated and replicated again to show the intentionality, because once they experienced it, they wanted to do the same for someone else.
And so if we could capsulate it into something, if you forget everything else that we've said, I think the principle that we want to instill in our students, in those that we work with before they go home, is that each one can reach one. And if each of us were to intentionally invest in one person for the year, God will bless and that will multiply.
Amen.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for sharing that. It's also such a hope for us and for our viewers that we can have purpose and we can do it simply, just by living our lives. And so not by having, a degree or having a specific job. And I think that's really important. So thank you very much for coming again and sharing. And for all of you viewers at home, thank you so much for viewing again, watching us, for supporting us with your prayers. And we encourage you to go on to LLBN.tv and continue to watch. Thank you.